I'm very, very happy to welcome you all here today and thank you for coming along. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. So perhaps you might just consider where you are at the moment and who the traditional custodians of the land that you're on today are. As we acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, we acknowledge our gratitude that we share this land. We acknowledge our sorrow for the costs of that sharing. We acknowledge our hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. I extend this respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander persons who might be present here today. Today's conversation offers us a wonderful opportunity to learn about that network of networks that is Talitha Kum. We welcome Abby Avelino, a Mary Knowles sister of St Dominic, who has spent a number of years in Japan and from there works as the Asia coordinator on the Talitha Kum International Coordinating Committee. In addition to this work, Abby volunteers in a parish ministry coordinating pastoral activities for the International Community Migrant Women's Ministry. She also advocates for the healing of women and children who've been abused. She has spent the last few weeks in chapter, and we are very grateful to her for the giving of her time so generously today. Sister of Charity, Colleen Jackson, has a background in secondary education from which she moved into psychology, bringing to us today over 20 years of work in community health services, specialising in grief, loss and trauma, and refugee torture and trauma. Currently based in Victoria, rural Victoria, Colleen is the Oceania coordinator on the Talitha Kum International Coordination Committee. These two dynamic and very busy women share the overnight shift during international meetings where the rest of the world happens to work in daytime and Abby and Colleen are in the middle of the night. I wonder if this shared experience is one of the reasons that they are so comfortable together. I'll just remind you before we start that this is not a Q&A session, so if you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat and they might not be addressed during this session, but we will get back to you at some stage and respond to your questions. I'll just remind you to mute yourselves now if you haven't already done so. And if you have any questions, pop them in the chat function. I invite Cindy Bowen, who is ACRATH's Community Development Officer, and she is going to host today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marg. Thanks, Colleen and Abby. How exciting. Now, let's just go.
Marg. And welcome, Abby.
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen.
So let's start. Colleen, can you introduce us to Talitha Kum? We all hear about Talitha Kum. Some of us know it, really intimately. Others, it's there. Tell us all a little bit about Talitha Kum.
Thank you, Cindy. Talitha Kum is an international network of networks of essentially sister-led organisations working against trafficking. The background is that back at the turn of the century, the international religious women decided that something had to be done about human trafficking. And over the ensuing years, networks began to emerge all over the world. And then in 2009, Talitha Kum International was launched. And it's a body or a coordination chair based in Rome. There's a coordinator being appointed and an international coordination committee, so a representative from each of the continents. And so Talitha Kum represents something like 60 networks in close to 100 countries around the world. We're not governed from above. Each network has its own character. It works in its own context with its own cultural responsibilities and responses, and they're all different. but we join together in our battle against human trafficking.
Thanks, Colleen. Now, Abby, if I ask you to unmute, thank you. You, as the regional coordinator for Asia, can you give us a glimpse of the work that goes on in Asia? And I think you're based in Japan. So can you introduce us to that style of work and where Talitha Kum is doing some other work? Thank you.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for this opportunity and bringing the works of our sisters from Asia. So in Asia, we are in 16 countries. We are in South Asia, and East Asian countries. Like Colleen said, sister-led networks working at the grassroots levels. So basically, my role is to coordinate and facilitate Talitha Kum's response to the needs of local networks in strengthening their prevention, protection, and networking activities. So in Asia, particularly in Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines, they are strong in raising awareness against human trafficking, of course, in collaboration with NGOs, local and international agencies, and other faith-based organizations. As you know, Asia is very diverse, especially in religions. So again, also in Talitha Kum, Thailand, the network is strong in crisis interventions for protection and support to victims and survivors of sexual exploited women and children. So this network, they have a program for psycho and social integration for survivors, especially for women. So I would like to share what we're doing so far. So at least in Thailand, recently they accompanied women from Cambodia and from Vietnam who were victims of exploitation. So these women were given care, protection, and support, like sheltered in one of the religious convents, and also continued counseling and legal assistance. So a success story actually through the help of the Talitha Kum Thailand and other support also from now this woman from Cambodia lives in a safe place, and she got a job, being able to get permanent residency in Thailand. She and her son, who has a Thai citizen, has a place to continue to integrate in society. That's one of the success story that we do. Actually, we do what we can for the intervention and accompanying survivors, especially at this time of COVID pandemic. So we focus on the needs of the victims and survivors. So my own, so I believe that by sharing and learning from our once other experiences and collaboration, we can work together to give hope and to empower survivors, especially women and children. That makes a difference.
It's good. Thanks, Abby. It's good to hear that things do make a difference. Colleen,
Yeah.
sitting in Australia, and I'm sitting in a lounge room, so far removed from Abby's story she just told us. The network, you've talked about the network. How does the network connect to Abby, and what difference does it make being part of this network?
From a central perspective, there's a lot goes on with Talitha Kum. By the way, the word Talitha Kum, the expression Talitha Kum, comes from the Gospels, and it means little girl, rise up. It comes from the Gospel story about Jairus' daughter who was presumed dead. And Jesus said to her, little girl, rise up. So that's the inspiration of Talitha Kum. Our connection with each other as networks is to promote training, best practice, to learn from each other. But there are also opportunities that we have to support the prevention or the support of a victim. So just by way of example, Australia became aware that there was a man just recently convicted, actually, here, who was sexually exploiting a young woman from an Asian country. And he's been convicted of severe child sexual exploitation. But with Australia's laws, she wasn't in Australia, so she's not technically a victim here. What we've been able to do in Australia is connect with the Talitha network in that country, who located the young girl and has been supporting her through what's been a very traumatic and damaging experience. So that's a practical example of the connections. But we also work together on policy and training approaches, education approaches. Education varies from network to network. That's where the individual characters of the various networks comes from. So say, for example, in Australia, we run education programs looking at where we might identify human trafficking and modern slavery, and as consumers, what we can do about that. If you were in, I guess, Asia and Africa, a lot of the education is about identifying or helping young girls and families not get trapped into trafficking. So there are lots of overlaps, but lots of individual approaches in the networks from one country to the other.
Thanks, Colleen. Abby, is there something you want to add to that? I saw you nod, or are you happy for me to ask a question?
Thank you so much, Cindy. Thanks, Colleen. That's really true about our networking, because in Asia, not only in Asia, but probably other parts of the world, we are committed ourselves to strengthening the collaboration and networking among sending and destination countries in the fight against this trafficking. Actually, we promote the safe migration. So I should know, I'm here in Japan, but we consider ourselves as destination countries. I would like to also share with you my accompanying with migrant women, particularly those coming from the Philippines. So in many cases, I met women and men who have been deceived and exploited. So I'd like to share with you the story, which pretty much success story. This story of 15 young Filipinas who came to Japan as international students, hoping to learn the Japanese language, but they were deceived and exploited. So they were victims of labor exploitation. So that was sad. So it took a while to solve the case. But however, through the collaboration, like I mentioned, there's very important factors. So between Talitha Philippines and Talitha Japan, and of course, the help with other NGOs, we were able to track down the traffickers and won the case in favor of the victims. So that's one success story. And also, another important factor is education and advocating for the rights of migrants, especially for women. So we advocate for women's technical interns, trainees from developing countries, especially from Vietnam and Philippines, who are deprived of being pregnant while they were in training. So many of these cases, like I said, were technical interns from Vietnam and other neighboring Asian countries. So Talitha, we don't really work alone. We work with social workers, local and international organizations, and government officials. So to find ways to support and help the victims of trafficking. So those are the things that we would like to add with Colleen about networking. So this is a very important in our works to fight against trafficking.
Abby, thank you. That whole amazing network, can't imagine. My network is sort of across the road or something, but your network is through so much technology and I suppose relationships. When you and Colleen talk, you can see that there's strong relationships there. I guess there was another word that came up the other day about diversity, that Talitha is diverse in its faith. Like I think we Sufi and Buddhist and Catholic, and then it was also multi-congregational. Like you two are in different congregations, and on our screens in front of us, there's lots of congregations present. Is the diversity a strength or not? Like, how does it work? Like, how does it enrich the work, I guess?
The diversity is enormous, and we have all our colleagues from all around the world in different parts of the world, different lifestyles and perspectives. But I think the strength is, if you look at Talitha International, what the international office is able to do is represent us at an international level, and that crosses all sorts of political and religious boundaries as well. So, for example, we've just had to reschedule one of our meetings because the coordinator in Rome has been asked to consult with the ambassadors at the Vatican about the situation of trafficking across Asia and Oceania. So the voice of the networks gets taken to an international level. It gets taken up and down. It's a two-way process.
Yeah, there's a lot of learning by the sound of it from what's going on in the ground and what's going on with people, because people, when we were talking, you talked about the heart. The people are actually the heart of all your work.
The heart of Talitha Kum's work and all the networks is the people. We're person-centred, survivor-centred and community-centred. So when we meet with other organisations, that's what we bring. I'll give you an example. We talk about going slavery-free chocolate and coffee, and sometimes we can congratulate ourselves that, we're buying good products from the supermarket, but we need to remember that there's a victim behind those products. That there are people, and it's the people position, the survivor's situation that's brought all the time to any negotiations, any work that Talitha Kum does, whether it's with survivors themselves or at the highest levels of advocacy.
Abby, is there a story of a project, and if you that you'd like to share in real detail, sort of like, how does it actually work in these countries? Like how, you shared a terrific story about, a couple of the international students and how different countries, different people got together and found them and worked with those people to keep them safe, to protect them. Is there another story you could actually tell us, little details? There was something about the youth ambassadors. That to me brings hope. So can you tell us something about one of those stories that you have shared so openly with us in our planning?
Sure. Thank you so much. Actually, I'm so excited to announce that because that's a very big project and I'm excited. So we recently launched the Talitha Kum Youth Ambassador Against Trafficking in Person. Basically, these young people are from Asia. So we encourage more young people to get involved, particularly in prevention. So these young people, there are about 25 youth and young adults are in formation to be ambassadors against trafficking in their own country. That's actually, it gives me hope when I see the interest of these young people are committed to working with local coordinators. So in awareness, in prevention activities. So I think they are ready to be ambassadors among their peers. So actually, we are very grateful for the Talitha Kum International for the support and for training not only the young people, but also a leadership training and also for the newly established networks. I think this is very important for us to broaden our or expand our network, not only within the religious sisters, like Colleen mentioned. We are very diverse. Now we're into the younger generation. And this younger generation are very excited to really to get involved with this concern. So thank you. We're actually finishing the training this coming Sunday.
So Abby, without going, like, how did the training happen? Like, is it online or is it, like, what does it look like, I guess?
Yes, online training. They are basically from Asia countries, and we do have a support from Talitha International. Most of the trainers are from Rome. We also invite one Asian speakers, and it's ongoing so far. And like, as you know, these young people, most of them are university students and also working students or something like that. So their time is very precious, but they are really engaged. I mean, it's amazing I woke up early in the morning just to join this training, but it's amazing. I mean, I hope that, we will publish more about this, report soon, but I'm so excited about this ambassador training program.
Abby, it's funny. I looked up at other people on the screen, and they're sort of they're because of your eagerness and your, knowing that it's working well. I'm sure we keep in touch with that. That would be great for us to sort of hear more about. So thank you.
Yeah, engage more.
Yeah, that would be good. Colleen, something you do, like you've talked to us in our planning about a project or, different things you do. What's something that you are part of that you'd like to share with us?
Some of the work of Talitha International Coordination Committee is to prepare documents and resources that can be used across the globe. Just recently, we finished a second study package that's just gone online on the gender differences that make women more vulnerable to trafficking. That's available for people to use. There's one on the effects of neoliberal economic policy, all a bit of a mouthful, but it's stimulating and challenging. We've just finished writing the scripts for 7 small film clips that are being produced by an internationally acclaimed filmmaker on human trafficking. And they're going to be extremely creative, interesting little clips of 2 minutes each that tell the story of what trafficking is and what Talitha does. Yeah. So there's work going on all the time behind the scenes to share information down. And of course, we're gathering information back all the time too. One of the things that Talitha does is gather data about what's going on around the world. And I know every network groans when it's asked to present data on what's happening, but that's how we know what's going on around the world. And that's where the strength of advocacy comes from at an international level, because the coordinator in Rome has grassroots evidence of trafficking and the work that we do together.
Thanks, Colleen. Preparing for this, I read some of that data, and in the chat, it'll go up, the report that you sent for us. And it was fascinating. It was totally, awe-inspiring, because I'd imagine the work becomes overwhelming. But this was sort of very clear as to how many projects and how many people it supported. It's really, thanks, Rosie's putting it up now on the screen. It was very interesting, and it was really good, not just because I was preparing for this, but because it was just good to know that there is hope, I guess. So thinking about, I suppose we've only got about 5 minutes left. Abby, what gives you hope? Like, if we thought about human trafficking and the extent of it, but you two are sitting here sharing hopeful stories. What gives you hope?
Yeah, expand the networking. That's my hope. And the key factor for me is really networking and advocacy. because that gives a hope for, especially for victims and survivors. Um, Colleen mentioned about the economy. So actually, TK promotes economy without exploitation.
Yeah.
So many people are losing their jobs, their lives. In developed countries, we really need to be conscientious. I reiterate what Colleen mentioned, that remember those children in developing countries who may have picked up your tea leaves for your tea. Women and children made your clothes and women accessories. Remember how many migrants, children, and workers who are victims of forced labor and child labor for our day-to-day needs. But we need to advocate for their rights. This gives me hope. I guess there's nothing impossible. I believe that each of us has a role to play in combating human trafficking, whether you are in school, whether in administration, whether in Paris work. So that's gives me hopes. We started Talitha networks a decade ago, but we are getting stronger and stronger. And like I said, we broaden our networking. So that's that's what I could share. Thank you.
Abby, thank you. It's hard to say anything else. And Colleen, in response to that, I suppose a couple of minutes, and you can both share in here. You've got a very captive audience, and we're all from ACRATH. We're connected to Talitha, or we're all, interested in ACRATH. Anyway, if we're not right here yet, any words of wisdom or encouragement to continue the partnering?
I'm grateful for all of the people across the world who are engaged with Talitha around this issue of trafficking. There are thousands of us. I think it's 10,000 actually connected to the networks. We keep learning from each other, and that's what gives me hope. I think we're invited to examine our consumer patterns here in Australia, to question policies that we take for granted. And I'll give you an example. During COVID, our government sent all the temporary visa holders home. Now, there's about 1 million temporary visa holders in Australia who keep our economy going, but we didn't want them during COVID. A lot of them have gone home to Asian countries and into trafficking. So we need to, I think, continue to ask ourselves what our own behaviours create, what our own consumer patterns create, and to join with others to make a difference. And our connection with Abby and Asia is really important because we learn. Your Youth Ambassadors program, Abby, is so exciting and something we can learn from and maybe adapt in our own context.
Abby, thank you, Colleen. Abby, a final word to the group of people on the screens.
Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you again. We're not alone. We work together in this fight. So you and I has a role to play. I guess this is the time that we really need to encourage not only young people, but every single person. Like Colleen mentioned, we have to be conscious what our consumerism, our economy. So we are together in this fight. So thank you so much for this opportunity to giving us a time for what we're doing in Talitha. And hopefully ACRATH will be, this is only a beginning, so we can continue our collaboration and networking. I was inviting Colleen for our monthly webinar to host our monthly webinar one of these days. So hopefully we can start doing that. So thank you so much.
I think the thanks is all ours, Abby and Colleen. I think Marguerite's coming back on, but in the meantime, thank you, you two. That was truly phenomenal, Marg.
Thank you, Cindy. That was extraordinary. Thank you, Abby and Colleen. I think on behalf of everyone here, I feel a bit speechless, which those who know me would find that a bit hard to understand. Can I thank you? You've filled us with challenge, but you've also filled us with hope. Extraordinary stories and an extraordinary sense to be connected within this network of networks that is Talitha Kum. I always find that very heartening. So thank you, Cindy, as well, for keeping this conversation alive. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Someone found out in the chat that someone said, I wish we could have more than half an hour. And yeah, I'm sure everyone does wish we could have more than half an hour, but we always promise half an hour. Can I ask, I'm sure there's one thing that's sparked in your heart today, something that might have emerged for you, whether it's challenging our consumer patterns or reading that report that Rosie put up a link to in the chat. There might be something you want to do over the next few days while you're still fired up by this. So I encourage you to take that action. I also encourage you to support ACRATH in any way that you can, whether it might be by considering membership, by asking for our newsletter every couple of months, by offering financial support, whatever it might mean, praying for us, praying for the victims. Always keep at the heart of your prayers the victims. And feel free to tell anyone today of what you've heard this morning. So just before we leave, our next session, as you can see there, is on the 27th of October, and our topic is going to be placing the person at the centre of our Christmas shopping. So I promise you, we had a little meeting about it yesterday. It's going to be fascinating, and we're hoping to attract a whole range of interested viewers. So again, thank you very much for today, and good wishes from ACRATH to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marg.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.